They say trust is the foundation of a strong marriage. It's the glue that binds two people together through good times and bad. For the first 5 years of my marriage with Claire, I believed that. We had what others called the perfect life, a cozy house in the suburbs, steady jobs, and our beautiful daughter, Lily, who was the light of my life. People looked at us and saw stability, happiness. But behind the facade, cracks were starting to show. It began with the subtle changes. Claire wasn't the same person I'd fallen in love with. She became distant, distracted, as if something or someone was pulling her away from our life together. At first, I chalked it up to stress from work. She'd come home late, exhausted, blaming endless meetings. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? This was Claire, the woman I'd shared my hopes and dreams with. The woman I trusted more than anyone in the world. But as the weeks turned into months, the excuses started to feel more like lies. The late-night meetings became more frequent, and her phone, once casually left on the kitchen counter, was now always with her, locked, tucked away in her bag. I tried to ignore the sinking feeling in my gut, tried to convince myself I was overreacting. After all, every couple goes through rough patches, right? Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Wednesday evening. Claire was in the shower, and I was sitting on the couch, absent-mindedly scrolling through my phone when hers buzzed on the table beside me. Out of reflex, I glanced at the screen. The message preview read, "Last night was incredible. Can't wait to see you again." It was from Mark, her colleague. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt a cold sweat break out on my skin. I knew Mark. He was one of the project managers at her company, someone she occasionally mentioned in passing. But why was he texting her like that? I grabbed her phone and opened the message. "Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you." My hands trembled as I read the words over and over. I felt like I was in a nightmare, like my entire world was crashing down around me. I wanted to confront her right then and there, to demand an explanation. But something inside me stopped. I'd heard stories before about people confronting their partners without proof, and how it only led to more lies, more cover-upus. I needed to be smart. I needed proof. For the next few days, I pretended everything was normal. I smiled, I laughed, I kissed her goodnight, all while my mind was racing, plotting my next move. Claire was good at hiding things, that much was clear. If I confronted her with just a text message, she'd find a way to twist the story, make it seem like I was overreacting. I couldn't let that happen. That's when I decided to take matters into my own hands. The first thing I did was order a GPS tracker. I chose Bouncy, a small, discreet device that I could attach to the underside of her car. It was perfect. Once it was installed, I could track her every move from my phone without her ever knowing. It felt wrong, spying on my own wife, but I had no other choice. I needed to know the truth. The tracker arrived 2 days later, and I installed it early one morning before she left for work. My hands shook as I crouched beneath her car, attaching the device to the undercarriage. I felt like a criminal, sneaking around in my own driveway. But this was the only way. For the first few days, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Claire went to work, came home, made her usual stops at the grocery store and the gym. I began to doubt myself, wondering if I was imagining things. Maybe that text from Mark was just a one-off, a misunderstanding. But then, on the 5th day, something changed. It was a Friday night. Claire had told me she was going out with some colleagues after work and that she'd be home late. I didn't question it. Why would I? I'd heard this story 100 times before. But when I checked the GPS tracker on my phone, her car wasn't at the bar she claimed to be going to. Instead, it was parked outside a small house in a quiet residential neighborhood. My heart raced as I watched the dot on the map, frozen in place. Who lived there? Why was she there? I needed to see for myself. I waited until midnight before I made my move. I told myself I was going for a drive to clear my head, but I knew where I was headed. As I drove down the darkened streets, my mind raced with possibilities. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe she was visiting a friend, or maybe there was some perfectly innocent explanation. But deep down, I knew. I knew what I was about to see. I parked a few houses down from the address the tracker had given me and walked the rest of the way, my heart pounding in my chest. The house was small, nondescript, with a single porch light illuminating the front yard. Claire's car was parked in the driveway, along with a sleek black sedan I didn't recognize. I crept closer, my breath shallow, my hands clammy with sweat. The curtains were drawn, but I could see shadows moving inside. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I didn't need to. The sight of Claire, my wife, sitting on the couch with another man was enough. They were close, too close. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. I watched for what felt like hours, though it was probably only a few minutes. Every second felt like a dagger twisting in my chest. I couldn't take it anymore. I stumbled back to my car, barely able to breathe, my mind spinning with disbelief, rage, and heartbreak. I didn't confront her that night. I couldn't. I needed more. The GPS tracker had given me a glimpse of the truth, but it wasn't enough. If I confronted her now, she'd deny everything. She'd make up some story, some excuse. I needed something concrete, something undeniable. That's when I took things to the next level. I ordered several Ring cameras and set them up outside the house, telling Claire I was worried about security. She didn't question it. Why would she? I was always paranoid about break-ins. What she didn't know was that I had also hidden 2 small voice-activated recorders inside the house, one in the living room and one in our bedroom. I waited. Every night, after Claire went to bed, I listened to the recordings. Most of the time, there was nothing. Just the sound of her watching TV, playing with Lily, going about her day. But then, one evening, I heard it, the sound I had been dreading. A man's voice, low and indistinct, but unmistakably there. I can't stay long. He might come back early. My blood ran cold. I replayed the recording over and over, each time feeling like I was being ripped apart from the inside. It was happening. Right there, in my own home. I needed more. I needed to catch her in the act. The next week was a blur of surveillance and strategy. I monitored her movements, tracked her car, and listened to every recording. I was obsessed, completely consumed by the need for proof. Every time I saw her with Lily, my heart broke a little more. How could she do this to us? How could she do this to our family? I finally caught her on a Thursday night. She told me she was working late again, but I knew better. I followed the GPS tracker to the same house in that quiet neighborhood. This time, I was ready. I parked far enough away so she wouldn't see me and waited. My hands shook as I watched the front door, my mind racing with 1,000 scenarios. An hour later, the door opened. Claire stepped out, laughing, her hand entwined with Mark's. They kissed right there in the driveway, bold and unashamed. My stomach turned. I wanted to rush out of the car, to scream at them, to demand answers, but I held back. This wasn't the time. I needed to be smart. I needed this to end on my terms. The confrontation came the next day, and I was ready. I laid out everything, the GPS logs, the recordings, the texts. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't let my emotions take over. I simply asked her one question. How long? Claire's face went pale. She stammered, trying to come up with some excuse, some explanation. But there was nothing she could say. The truth was out. The months that followed were brutal. Claire and I separated, and the divorce proceedings were messy. She wanted half of everything, our house, our savings, and, most importantly, custody of Lily. But I wasn't about to let her take it all. I had the evidence, the undeniable proof that she had betrayed me, that she had torn our family apart. In court, Claire's lawyer tried to paint me as the villain, as the paranoid husband who had spied on his wife. But I stayed calm. I played the fool, acting like I was willing to settle for less, like I just wanted this nightmare to be over. But when it came time to present my case, I laid it all out, the recordings, the GPS data, the texts. The courtroom went silent. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. I kept the house, the majority of our assets, and most importantly, full custody of Lily. Claire walked away with nothing but her guilt. As I walked out of the courthouse that day, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. I had won, but at what cost? My trust in people was shattered, my life turned upside down. But I had Lily, and I had the truth. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could finally start to heal.